scenarios that end in November before Thanksgiving. So not bringing people back after Thanksgiving to avoid maybe the time period of potential.
Could do finals online, after Thanksgiving. Julian, how are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. You all okay?
Yep.
Sir. I think we're still waiting on Dwayne and a few other folks too.
Kim, did you have much time to study it? I read it really quick.
I didn't. I won't say I studied it. I read through it. The point about Thanksgiving I found interesting, just in terms of mitigating a potential second wave. But
I couldn't tell if there was one category that said events, and I didn't know if that meant student on campus events, if that applied to to athletics in any way.
That's interesting. I didn't pick up on that. I imagine that it is, student events, but you would think it would all fall under that umbrella.
Yeah, I don't know. Like I said, I ripped through it really quick.
Yeah.
Hey, Dwayne.
Sorry about that. Now I know why Julian was asking for the information, because I had to go find it. But then I realized Melissa sent that today, so I gotta go look at today's stuff.
That's me. I was digging. I thought we said today. I don't know.
I've got so many Zoom information.
That was my bad. I forgot to create that meeting for today. We've had quite a few.
Yeah. I didn't realize how much I was totally dependent on that, Quinn, because I just oh yeah, I got it. Oh
yeah, I started looking last night for the link in the calendar invite, and I said, wait a minute, there's no calendar invite. Hold on. Schedule meeting. I just got myself confused. Which is not hard.
Everybody. You're missing John.
He was just on a minute ago. I'm not sure where he went, but if you want, I can go ahead and read the statement. Started. Yep.
So.
All right. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic state of emergency and Governor Beshear's executive orders regarding social distancing, this meeting is being held via teleconference pursuant to Senate Bill 150, as signed by the governor on March 30th, 2020, and Attorney General Opinion 20-05, and in accordance with KRS 61.826, because it is not feasible to offer a primary physical location for the meeting.
All right. Thank you, Quinn. First of all, thanks again for jumping on. I know it's a different time for us guys. Melissa, I'm a little disappointed. Your background was the winner for the first couple meetings, and now I don't know what I'm seeing. Okay, there we go. Yeah, give us some hope here. But just want to know, I guess, from a review standpoint, did anybody, as we went through that exercise, any major troubles? What are the obstacles that we kind of ran into trying to pull those up? One of the things I wanted to preface, just a review, we talked about facilities, how do they reopen? Return to practice, return to competition, return to fans. Facility piece, I think we talked about it globally, but I just want to make sure we reemphasize that facility piece is also incorporates anything prior to practice with athletes. So whether that's workouts, things of that nature encompassed in that facilities, obviously getting to open the facility period, but also doing some level of non-team practicing in those facilities too. We can probably maybe the first thing, do y'all think we need to add that as another point specifically, opening facilities, then, workouts, then practices, or does facilities itself encompass that?
Well, Dwayne, I can tell you, I had a long conversation this morning with the Lieutenant Governor about the original June 15th order. And I can say, if the more clarity we can add and leave a lack of ambiguity, probably the better off we are.
Okay, that was my thinking too. I just didn't want to be overkill, but
they did not realize.
Even thinking about it, let her know anybody could assume, because obviously there's some things that might not have any workouts, right? But if you want to have something like that, you probably need some parameters. We probably need to have a slide or two of that address that specifically. So I think actually getting what needs to happen with a facility to be open is a whole nother thing. So
well, she was surprised that there was even debate about what youth meant, and we got that clarified. It's definitely below middle school, but
okay.
Any of this we're throwing out there, we probably ought to say, you know, hey, this is what we're thinking about.
Okay.
Dwayne, do we have a kind of a working document that we're sharing?
So Quinn and I talked about that a little bit today. I think obviously we got some different varying things. I know, Melissa, you're working on some gathering of things too. I don't have a working document of everybody's thoughts, right? I was hoping we would craft that somewhat today. I think when we left last meeting, I think the hope was we get all that stuff in, we work for one thing. I don't think we're there yet, unless somebody's telling me something different from the staff side. But I think we've got to get to the point where obviously us coming up with our questions and answering it ourselves, obviously that's more fresh to the mind. Maybe we walk that walk now, give the staff a time to put those thoughts together, what we're keeping and what we're not. And then that way on tomorrow, we're reviewing what we established in this meeting today and cleaning that up to submit on Friday, if that makes sense.
Sure, no, that sounds good. I just want to make sure I wasn't missing something.
Yeah, I made the same phone call to Quinn. Was like, hey, we're supposed to be doing something else to make sure. So I think that's why we gave ourselves a little more time today. Obviously, we've got a lot of moving parts and things going on, and they've got 30 committees, subcommittees that they're helping with too. So maybe we start with facility stuff. And I know each of you submitted it. I don't know if we shared it amongst our group, so it's probably good to just talk about those step by step. I've also spent most of my time since last meeting talking to some of my counterparts at different schools, especially in the state too, just to be able to add more what we're thinking about with our timetables from our governor's office. You know, might be, you know, where we were looking at Tennessee and Louisiana things before, it doesn't really match up as much as what were our timelines in Kentucky. So I kind of focus those energies on talking to some of the other, people in the business where they are. Obviously, there's not any public documents out there in the state of Kentucky that I was referencing, but just kind of getting a sense of where they're going with in what direction. So I'll be able to comment to those things from the university side of it, from the state. But I was trying to figure out, does anybody else, since facilities was the first one, want to chime in on what they submitted or some review of that from the facility side? Did we ever, is that John on the phone?
Yep, I just called in. I'm having internet problems. I'm sorry. They're working on it.
No problem.
I can talk about what I sent in, Dwayne. Okay. I think a lot of what the facilities are going to be looking at beyond the sanitation side is going to be following in line with the governor's guidelines and CDC guidelines. It's going to be tough for them to have individuals on courts and on fields practicing, but they're going to have to limit it to one team per practice or one team per goal. I talked to a friend of mine up at Westfield, up in Carmel. They've turned it into 3 different phases along with the opening. And a lot of what I put in there in regards to my suggestions were regarding the facility entrance. They're going to really have to police and monitor the entrances so that they've got social distancing, concession stands, restrooms, all those facility support areas, and all the staff's going to really have to be up on not only sanitation, but also the PPE, mask, gloves, and everything else. And that might be one of the hardest things for them to acquire to be in a position to reopen.
Yeah, I agree with you because honestly, I think it seems like the low-hanging fruit, but it's probably the most difficult task to be able to reopen your facility and get to a point of some level of operation. Now, obviously, it's probably going to include the smallest amount of people, whether you're doing from putting my university athletics hat on and Holly, chime in too if how it affects in your world. But I think the focus for us on the SEC school level is how do I reopen my workout facilities first? And that's probably seems like the easier task because we know that's the focus and we know we can control, and we're waiting on dates and when those things can happen. But immediately you're going to, like you said, you know, they've been cleaning buildings and things of that nature along the way already now. That's why they don't want anybody in them, because they got to redo all those things. But the things we talked about is, you know, just like if you're going into a doctor's office right now, or you're going anywhere, there, you know, you're asking the questions. You take, you know, some level to be able to take temperatures, because some of these fever options are not something I necessarily feel like I have a fever. You know, so just asking somebody is not going to be enough. Limiting the amount of people. Obviously, workouts are in the nature of they're usually staggered anyway. But my thought process is, hey, the coaches don't need to be involved in the first wave. At least strength and conditioning personnel, training room personnel, like no need of having the other people involved at this step. Less is more, you know, and
Yes.
staggering the student athletes, because you're trying to prove this has got to work before you can get to the next step to add the coaches element to get to a point where you can actually get on the field in the gym, you know, on a court to practice. Because the first thing is, if the small group didn't work for a workout or a weightlifting session, we're never going to get to the other point where you're around most of your teammates. So we're not talking about, I wouldn't encourage step one not to be opening up locker rooms or anything of that nature. And if everybody's still at home, you come dressed, you go through your workout time, you put in your time in. I mean, you've got, hey, one way in and one way out, like we're doing with grocery stores and things of that nature. I think as many things we could do like that for taking advice from the things that are been open during this, taking that approach to how we open our facilities will probably be the best chance for success and not taking a step back.
And Dwayne, one thing that in addition to all the things that John mentioned, one thing that I had submitted is the question between indoor and outdoor facilities.
Correct. I can tell you from talking to her this morning, Kevin, I don't know what your conversations have been with Stack's office or Lieutenant Governor, but they definitely want outdoor first. Right. There's a big push on that. So separating those is very wise. And that means the weight rooms won't be the first thing open, but it does mean you can open facilities to general conditioning. You can open up tracks, you can open up things like that where you space them out.
Right.
We were told this morning about that we need to develop our plan and get it to them by the end of next week for the start of high school stuff. And as Jackie told me that, or Coach Coleman told me that it's to draft it and then get the revisions that will inevitably come back to us of what we're really going to do. And then we'll add the timeline to it. But they did say outdoor first is for certain. There's still quite a bit of concern. It may not be the issue at Dwayne or Holly's level, but about the way air handlers are and some of the gyms, some of the facilities. Are they recirculating old air? Are they bringing in new air? Places like KBA and others that often have a lot of activity, are they properly circulating the air? Apparently the health people are really honing in on there's a difference between if you got that clean air versus if you have it recirculated. They're worried about, if it's not being recirculated, or if it is being recirculated just inside, that could cause a hot spot as well. So, I think that there's things that are really, they're outside of certainly my expertise, but I'm reading a lot and learning that there's going to be steps. Kim's exactly right.
Yeah, that makes sense, Julian, because I thought about like if the new football weight room, it opens up to their outdoor, outside practice fields, and that's easy to get in. It can be open air, basically.
Exactly.
Where another facility, you might could open a door that might be down a hall, but that's about the most you can do as far as getting. That's a huge difference.
Yep.
But nobody was building weight rooms. I mean, the older they are, I'm sure they're not attached to be able to be.
My guess is
open air was the
my guess is even the Seton Center doesn't have a lot of open air. On a big campus, it's probably one of the older recreation buildings over there. So I'd say that we just need to keep that in mind for other people as they try to go, because school facilities are going to, what I know that's not public is the school facilities are going to, high schools and middle schools are going to remain shut down through at least the 15th of June. And then we've got to give them a gradual plan for opening that back up if we do. The governor's preference is July the 1st. So definitely if we want outdoor stuff, June 15th on this deadline, I hope we prioritize that.
And I think the reason I brought up workouts a little bit is because we're talking about gyms being open at the 1st of June. That seems to be the national focus.
Yep.
On some of the major university level is, I mean, there's some schools that are doing stuff now, to some degree, so-called voluntary, not within our league, because we have no activities are allowed, voluntary, involuntary, through the 31st of this month. But I think that's why it's kind of on the forefront of what do we get into in June if that date doesn't move. And so that's most of the focus in the SEC schools. Some of the comments that you've been seeing from athletic directors, you're talking about, getting those, that's the first step to normalcy, getting people back on campus. One, can student athletes get back on campus, or, can our students, our high school students go back to the high school to get into any level of facility? What triggers that, and what are we suggesting the guidelines need to be in place before that, suggestion for that piece?
Yeah. Well, for us, Dwayne, you know this much better than I, but the management council's decision yesterday to go ahead and extend the recruiting dead period buys us a little time through the end of June. I mean, we can just tell people that the number one parent objection is my kids looking for exposure. Well, guess what? The recruiting shut down. So, we get a little comfort to do outdoor maybe the 15th and then start looking at gyms and weight rooms on the 1st if there's no ventilation. And we don't, unfortunately, as I mentioned the other day, most of our schools are not going to be able to meet any kind of standard that the normal even workout center will meet, because their weight room is not exactly posh. It's a totally different thing at our level.
So should we suggest is maybe at least one bullet point, or I don't know, from a staff standpoint, we're recording this, but maybe suggest when possible, just kind of how we're suggesting with some of the other things about people working from home. Maybe one of the suggestions, if possible, to conduct all workouts either outdoors or in an open air situation would probably be the first thing as a suggestion versus actually being inside the facility.
Well, and for us, it could also be done, and I know this is, we're talking about both levels. For the high school level and middle school level, it could be that part of that statement has to be outdoors or indoors at a facility, at a non-school facility that meets the standard for the June 1st opening. We can give them an option to go take their team
That's good.
to some third party at our level. I mean, you all have got rules about that that would be quite a bit different.
Do you think we have to add things like you have to be able to have secured PPE equipment, the masks, if it's decided on other equipment, you got to have the temperature, you got to have something to do temperatures, you got to have the questionnaires, you got to have someone to administer it.
I think we're probably looking at it as recommended guidelines. I think, yes, obviously, just like what we're doing right now with businesses and masks, I mean, it's not enforced or ruled, but it's recommended guidelines. And I think that's where we need to be here. If you want to take all the precautions, here's the guidelines that you can follow every one of them. And if you only can accomplish 80% of them, every spot, I think that's our goal. So Holly, yes, I think we want to list all those things. And some, depending on where you are, your capabilities, will kind of get you there. And
I'm just thinking about the governor's benchmarks.
Yeah. And Holly, I think that's a good point. What we're going to do in terms of just the layout of the report is, when you talk about PPE and that sort of thing, that's something that falls right under the governor's rules for reopening. So that's something that affects all these different subcommittees that we're working on. Mm-hmm. So there will be a section at the front of the report that says that pretty clearly says all of the subcommittees reports fall within this specific. These are things that touch all these different subcommittees reports, right?
Quinn, if I can give you a suggestion, and Kevin, you've been in politics as long as I have. I would make sure that on all the separate sub-reports, you cross-reference to go back and read that. Because I'm
Yeah.
telling you, especially in sports, they read the one sentence totally out of context 95% of the time.
Sure.
So if there's going to be that guiding document up front, then at least on this one, should refer back, because when we leave something open for interpretation. Second thing that I was going to mention, that Kevin, I know you've been through this, the word guideline versus guidance is quite a bit different connotation. And I'm assuming you all will make sure as staff that we don't misstep with wording.
Yes, we're gonna, Julian, you're so right, and we're gonna be reading real careful when we proofread.
I've been burnt by that. Don't I understand?
Trying to think if there's anything else on that.
On the facilities piece, is there anything to be considered in terms of size of facility or capacity of facility? Are there any differentiators there that we need to think about? Or does that take care of itself as you're social distancing? The bigger the facility, the easier that is.
Yeah, you're talking about the percentage piece that so many stores and things are using.
Right.
Yeah, because I mean, I think obviously we got to do like kind of what both Julian and Quinn reference. Remind people still about the distance, social distancing, and you know when possible, the limit wherever the state limits go on how many people can be in a place will probably dictate that too. That combination might get us there.
Right.
Yeah, and I like that, Dwayne, because as I think about it, I guess what I've said here on my own notes, just making on a Google Keep document, I'm looking at, like, if we were going to open up workout facilities, they've got to meet the standards that gym openings were required. If
Right.
they've got as far as number in there, we probably could cross-reference something that's already out there, like how many people were allowed to be in close proximity at Toyota, differently than something else, because that gives you that built-in distance when you're throwing, you know, barbells around and things like that. We probably could cross-reference others and not have to have our own selves vulnerable for what we picked.
Right.
Yeah, but I think, like you said, on the other stuff, including that, making sure people don't get lost. If you're going down that list and you're only thinking about what you see, you got to make sure you reference that as much as possible, because those are reoccurring things. Even if you see it on the front end, you read it on the front end, like you said, you skip to the meat and potatoes so you can figure out what you got to do, because you think you know all the other stuff. I mean, we all guilty of that at sometimes. I think, was it Melissa that was you that sent us the information on the youth baseball, softball? I think that was very helpful. Just thinking about some of the same things I'd seen in some of the other states, but probably felt a little more normal. I think it was you. Was it you? No, it was you, Julian, that said we got to get past, you know, back to what we were pre-COVID and our new normal. It seemed feasible, you know, not asking people to go out and beyond and things. So I think we got to make sure we have that lens that we're making this, hey, someone feels doable, or versus people look at this and like, you're basically telling me not to open. You know, we're just trying to let you know the things you can do, like all the physical things you can do, like whether, you know, keeping so many people in a facility at one time, like Kim's point, or, you know, entry points and out, you know, where, you know, those are not normal things prior to this, but now that is. If you've been anywhere, you've experienced these things, getting to ask questions, being screened on the front end, you know, having hand sanitizers or hand, you know, things in place somewhere, you know, not making certain things available that you normally would do, like, you know, any kind of nutrition areas where it's a kind of more, for lack of a better term, this buffet style of how people used to share things and get, you know, those things are, you know, we're not doing any of those things, just to cut down all the contact points that you normally have. So if you're going to give out, you know, snacks or supplements, you know, give those in individual things and bags to give to people, so there's no, you know, cross-contamination or people grabbing this and that. It's not a shopping area. What's thought about? Go ahead.
Well, to that end, do we need to be thinking about, or is this later on, that we encourage facilities not to try to provide, you know, water cups and other services, and later on we mentioned to the participants they've got to bring their own, and it's got to be exclusive to them.
I agree. Because I think if you have the things there, people naturally just, your instincts take over, right? If you haven't been anywhere, if you've just been at the house and you haven't had to adjust at all,
It's free.
yeah, it's tough. I mean, I remember my first trip to the grocery store. I probably, if there was imaginary people at every 6 foot drop, I ran into all kinds of people. But just because, I mean, just your instincts are not there. You're not thinking about, oh, I've crossed the line, you know, thinking about those things. So trying to provide that guidance.
And the leagues and stuff that we're talking about, the actual Lexington opening up small leagues, how they would do it, they're so community oriented anyway. There's going to be people that also haven't seen each other in a couple of months. You know, yesterday morning I had to run to Lexington Clinic East to get a blood test. And so I go out there and I run into a guy I haven't seen in 30 years. Well, you know, you see who it is and you give it 3 false starts because you're wanting to go over there, but no, but you know, and that will be something that, you know, is cautious. It deals with handshakes. It deals with everything that touches us. You know, we're going to have to tell people it's not bad sportsmanship if you don't shake the referee's hand or fist bump them. It's, you know.
And I think that's why that essential personnel is an important piece when these facilities open. You don't need just extra people in there that are not participating in it. That, you know, if the coaches or other personnel, I mean, we see all these staff, no matter what level we are, from youth all the way up through college, you know, where you've got all these extra people. That's just more people we've got to worry about where they go and what they're doing or what they're bringing in or what they're taking out. So I think that when you're first, you need to have a good plan of, you know, essential personnel and who has access to the building, not even when the things are going on. Because if all of us, if it's really about Quinn and Melissa and their groups, and they've got their groups and they're working, and we're not supposed to all be there, but then after hours, we're all exploring through there, we might as well work out with everybody, you know.
Yeah, the hangers on are the problem at our level. You all have a lot of barriers to prevent that most of the time, but the hangers on, you know, I know that after 2.5 months of being cooped up, when we open up informal workouts for football and tell the parents they can't come, we will once again be the headline. I'll just tell you.
Yep. Good luck.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of our coaches are a little nervous about when this starts back. You know, you've got people that are in those different age groups too, you know, and those will be concerns. We'll probably see less grandparents coming to some of these events and games than we would.
Till we get a vaccine.
Normally. You know, and I like the fact that they even recommended that they don't. Like, that's maybe, you know, hey, obviously you can. Do you think we need to have at least some level in place from a liability standpoint? You know, I know this, we were talking about some of the youth leagues that you're signing some kind of, I mean, obviously in the university process, we're going to have something, but I'm just talking about for, you know, high schools, things of that nature, having some kind of, you know, because parents are going to have to, you got to make sure somebody check with their parents if they're going, right? Or some process, you know, we're not necessarily making a form, but a consideration is to have some kind of waiver process that you're
like they had in the baseball, softball.
Yeah, that you're incurring the risk.
By being there, you're agreeing that you understand the risk in being there, and
right.
You're also submitting that you haven't been exposed, right? You're kind of just by attending, you're submitting that these things are true.
Kevin, I would ask you this question, and we're not going to hold you to the final answer, but what is the general city council with an E, so lawyers, opinion on waivers anyway? Because I know our lawyers don't think they're worth the paper they're printed on, but it might protect. I mean, do y'all do that a lot with city services?
Trying to think, Julian, I don't know of a time where we've issued a waiver within the fields that I deal with, but I don't want to make a blanket statement because I don't know some of the others, and I haven't had that particular conversation with one of our attorneys.
Well, one of the things that we could do, Dwayne, is all those things, I mean, just as an alternative, all those things you might envision right now on a waiver form go into the guidance list. You're running a fever, you shouldn't attend. Your kids shouldn't attend. Right. You should certify that you've checked their temperature. You should attest that you've, anything other than sign, that you've checked their temperature. You haven't had a positive test in the last 14 days, whatever. Maybe we ask for your health guy the city's health guide and maybe give us a list of things that are shoulds versus, doing too much of a development of a form. We've got a state form for all the middle and high schools, but it's not worth the paper it's printed on.
Julian, I think to that point, if it's helpful and you all think it's something we should include, one of the recommendations could be that Dr. Humbaugh's team over at the health department, how do you say this, develop some kind of at least initial checklist for consideration by you all.
Well, it puts it back in the expert's hands.
That's right.
Melissa's got the worst job. She's trying to take all this down, but then she's gonna go back and watch the video like 3 times and try to figure it out.
I'm taking it down too, and I just want to
Okay.
I just want to make sure I understand. The recommendation would be that Dr. Humbaugh and the folks at the health department come up with a checklist essentially that allows folks to participate.
Either participates or attend. Yep.
Or attend workouts or games, right? Okay.
Yeah, and I think it's even more important than that the kids and the other personnel that are there have the same guidelines.
Exactly.
They're getting those same checks, they're getting those same, adhering to those same risks that I think that makes that way everybody's all into that.
Yeah.
Julian, does that, and I agree with doing this, but does that, as far as KHSAA goes, does that present you any problems? Lexington's got this kind of guideline, maybe Christian County doesn't.
Well, let's work out some kind of sentence or something that says, in the absence of state guidelines, these are the recommended checklist. And that way, if something comes out a little later that supersedes and we've used health people, then we're okay.
That's good.
That way we don't create that conflict. The other thing you don't want them doing is running to the Jessamine County leagues to play because the rules here are too tough.
I mean, I don't know what you guys have experienced firsthand, but going out publicly 3 weeks ago and now from a temperature taking kind of places, I mean, even the process is totally different.
Yep. Those thermometers came in.
Right. So they might make it harder to get any of them. But
well, I noticed that a couple of leagues, I saw reopenings from a couple of leagues that I got in the Google thing today, or the Google feed today. Their policy states that parents have to have taken their test before they left the house, taken their temperature before they left the house. Mm. I don't know that that's going to pass Humboldt's threshold, or certainly don't think it'll pass Stacks, but that's, some people are because they recognize they may not be able to get them at every park, a thermometer. They're saying, in the absence of a thermometer on site, parents have taken the temperature at home. That's just something that's going to be a real challenge, because that seems to be the number one thing they're pushing all of us as employers to do. You don't come in now. I saw the construction crew. I drove down Broadway a couple of days ago, and the construction crew had a gate there where they're building a new student center there at Holly's place, and they were checking new guys coming in. So it's going to be here for a while.
And obviously, as this thing is kind of evolved, that the temperature check is not the end all be all, but that's low hanging fruit at this point. Like that, we're willing to at least check that, because if you got a fever, you definitely don't need to be there no matter what's going on, right? I mean, so, and like you said, we probably need to follow the state guidelines on what constitutes a fever too.
100.4.
Yeah, we talked about that on our first call, so we need to make it just in case that changes over time.
True.
So just a quick point of clarification. Are we recommending that all participants, staff, and attendees either have their temperature checked on site or certify that they have checked their temperature at home and that they fall under 100.4? Is that what we're saying here?
Could we flip that sentence and say that no person or no participant, coach, or fan should attend if they're got 100.4 temperature? Let's don't get into where it's taken. Is one way of doing that sentence, Quinn?
Yeah,
that's better.
Yeah, I agree. Because I think that'll help everybody accomplish that.
It's going to be different if I'm playing in a pickup game at Coolevin Park. it might be a little less structured.
Right.
Versus what I've got in other places.
And the way you accomplish to gather that information, I've seen all kinds of ways too. So you don't really have to get in the weeds on that. I mean, I've seen everything from an app to form to just a Q&A, checking boxes. That's all happening a lot of different ways. We're trying to make sure there's some minimal guidelines that everybody can adhere to. And then obviously each school organization can adapt further from there. Anything else on that one? Okay, let's move on to, I guess, to our next one. If I'm not mistaken, was it practice? We kind of got into it a little bit. But what are the things that we add when we're talking about now? Obviously, we've got to be in a better situation from, state guidelines to get there. But what are some other thoughts on that in particular?
I mean, I think on practices, I think we should easily say some things like, that we shouldn't be sharing of things that you don't have to share, like pennies, water bottles, cups. I don't know if we'll ever get back to swimming, but if we do, goggles. I think those are kind of the first things. I thought this was a good suggestion, is that you give kids a 6 foot space to put their personal belongings so they don't get mixed up with somebody else's.
And Holly, that's exactly, I've noticed the last 3 plans I've seen for the resumption of baseball talked about practice sessions, you don't use dugouts.
Yeah.
Because of that exact thing right there, where things tend to get intermingled.
It's been interesting outside of our state. When I've checked at some of the other schools, it's amazing how many of them are already, they're planning on locker rooms. Like,
yep.
Well, I don't know if they're going to swap out how they're doing the locker rooms and spread them out or anything, but they're getting into the locker room conversation a lot sooner than most of them.
We're not going to be talking about locker rooms for a while at Transy.
Yeah, I was very
I feel
surprised.
like that's the breeding ground.
Yeah, it's a breeding ground normally. It's a breeding
ground.
Right.
Locker rooms are a problem.
I'm worried about MRSA before I even got to COVID-19.
Right. We've got some people that are talking about when they come in, they're taking a shower, getting dressed for practice, and then taking a shower afterwards within the locker room. I don't know. Heard that's more of an old wrestling adage. That's kind of where it came from a little bit to protect from some things, but I don't know if that's. I don't think there's any way we're going down that road. Take a shower at home. You take it before and after.
Well, another thing would be getting the teams together before and after. Coach likes to get them all sitting on a bench or somewhere, and they're going to really need to think about how they address their team during practice with spacing.
Well, John, from the various things that have come out from a lot of your compatriots is they are all saying you stay in the car till it's your turn. You come directly to the practice.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, they're doing a lot of that for that very reason.
Individual workouts even. I mean, you think about it with basketball, even if they're outdoors, trying to keep people separated, sanitizing the equipment before, during, and even after.
I've seen some recommendations, and I think it's probably even better for the younger kids, is that only the coaches touch the equipment. They take care of the sanitation before and after.
That's cool.
Definitely adults.
And I think, Holly, kind of on the stuff you talked about, on the stuff that they just might get confused to share, but also depending on what level we're talking about, making sure everybody has their own equipment, so no sharing of equipment.
Yeah. See, I think in baseball, even, I can just imagine, I've watched teams that have 6-8 people use the exact same bat, and they're coming up and that's a fingertip touch. And so obviously they've got to have some way of cleaning bat handles. If they're doing baseball, they've got to be able to quickly do that, because, not everybody's playing for one travel team that plays in the $1,000 league. There's a whole lot of them that just got 2 bats and 1 bucket of balls.
That was my youth league experience. The bases were loaded. I didn't have a helmet. The guy on deck didn't have a helmet. The bases were loaded.
Yeah, exactly. And they didn't have one big enough for my head anyway.
Another thing we might address with practices is with some of these sports. My brother-in-law is the president of Kentucky Youth Soccer, and I know they're coming up with guidelines for their coaches for practices. So it may be something to reference in our guidelines, anything that is kind of edict by those national or state associations, whether it's KHSA, Kentucky Youth Soccer, baseball, whatever.
And what we could say in that is that becomes a best practice.
Yes.
That way we're not mandating they join these organizations, but that, John, that's exactly what we're talking about too, is some of the stuff from USA Football that they're recommending on safety guidelines and stuff. We're going to say is just consider that as best practice recommended guidance, period. And then the liability gets on them so strong when they don't go by that. That's what you really want. This is all about transferring risk.
And if I'm not mistaken, the groups of 50, is that July 1?
Yep.
Right now?
And that's what we're looking at as a football threshold, because if I got less than 50, there's not very many of our schools have less than 50.
And they all need some time anyway to even get ready for that. So it's probably
we're hopeful that we can do it. Our plan right now is that we would have 2 weeks of general conditioning, a week of field specific with no equipment, and then about mid-July, which is only a week later than normal, they might be able to put on a helmet, but that's only if we have guidance from the CDC and the health department that wearing of the helmet doesn't contribute to that whole problem with the virus. The other thing we're running into at our level that would not be an issue at Dwayne's level, I'm sure, but the helmets, all the helmets have to be reconditioned each year, and 5 of the 6 helmet reconditioners in the country have been shut down because of the coronavirus. So we got a bunch of people, they can talk about wearing equipment all they want, they don't have it back yet. So we're going to get a little help.
So Holly,
I could see
football.
Yeah, I could see Kalinowski having that happen. He'd go crazy. Now, Holly, I sent to Glenn when he was with there. We did research when I was there on the actual when Transy had football till World War II, and so there's it's about time for y'all to pick it back up. There's no risk involved. Don't worry. No nothing.
I appreciate that, but I think we'll be on hold.
Oh gosh,
it needs to be revenue productive. We need to make sure and guarantee that right now. Nobody's
absolutely.
Well, in regards to practice and some of these other like fall sports, for say example KHSA, soccer to me outdoors, you could separate the kids, the equipment, is minor as far as other than kicking the ball, but still there has to be guidelines for conducting the practices and then interaction, because there is that contact.
That's exactly what we're kind of separating soccer right now, and I think that's what the USA groups are doing too, into the drill work versus anything that simulates scrimmage work, because you're in every bit as close contact in soccer as you are in basketball, and that's really all the time touching. You could do drill work, you could do passing, you could do stuff around the goal, you could probably do stuff and do pretty good social distancing. The big debate, I'm telling you what, I got tangled up in one the other day on this other task force with the national office dealing with volleyball, because of the way the game is played now. You can't, it's not the old, you're always 6 foot separated and somebody serves, you just stand there. I mean, the crisscrossing and play running and everything else that they do, it's going to be just about as hard to regulate as basketball. That's what we're really struggling to come up with a good list, because unless you're just going to do serving and blocks at the net. No, by the way, if you're going to practice blocking at the net, you're within 6 feet. So I think the indoor sports and anything with the large groups is definitely a little ways away.
Yeah. I mean, we need to see some progress with all the stuff we're talking about implementing here pretty soon. I mean, I think that's why these things are so important, because if this fails, so to speak, or takes a pause, then the other stuff has no shot of getting started.
Well, we've tried to tell our constituency, and I saw this in a memo that the OVC sent out too, that we're not going to have a vaccine for a while. The FDA is not the fastest moving organization, but we do have, remember, the big thing about it is for even step 3 or phase 3 is a vaccine or reliable treatment. And I think that's why everybody's focusing their efforts on reliable treatment that may come faster. We've been telling everybody, remember the or, stay positive. Nobody's saying we're done until January. Just take a deep breath. But I tell you, I don't know about, I mentioned this one time before and then I'll quit talking, but this whole travel ball sector is just, I don't know. They must be the most cooped up people of all of the people that have been cooped up for 2 months. They're ready right now to play in national tournaments that already have canceled, but they're ready to play them. You know,
Julian, you just doubled our viewership on YouTube.
Yeah. You know, I mean, I'm just here. That's what we're hearing for sure, is that it's those people, and I don't blame them. They're cooped up. I understand it. I would be traveling all around following our nephew, but you know, they want it fixed today.
Yeah, this is the year if you want to create a tournament just in town.
Yeah.
But you might be very successful because nobody else can go anywhere if you can get it done.
You know, Dwayne, it's interesting you say that, because one of the recommendations, and I want to say it's Madison, Wisconsin, but somebody up there put out, is one of their recommendations locally was that their teams consider only playing in that county and one adjacent, because they're trying to contain. And I thought that was a very interesting thing. And it, you know, I can imagine it would not be very politically popular here, but I thought that was interesting what they said.
I mean, it's a lot of, especially right now, there's a lot of cost savings in that one. I mean, it's obviously not going to have the financial impact to the cities involved that it would have, but right now that's a zero. I mean, you're not having anything. So from the kids' standpoint, so we can think about that. I don't think there's a lot to add from the practice element. I mean, obviously we kind of incorporated most of the things. It's just going to be more people involved outside of the things that we've talked about. I don't know if the staff have anything to add that maybe we're not addressing in the practice element.
I think you kind of touched on this, but kind of clarifying, the higher contact sports obviously being later, and that's a, kind of a whole thing to itself.
The other thing too, Kip, that concerns me a little bit is that I hope people don't have the impression, even with youth sport, that on June 15th, it's time for games. Mm-hmm. I think we've got to really preach the progression. Dwayne said that earlier. Yeah. That's got to be consistent. You can't just you can't throw the first pitch opening ceremony June 15th. That might be a good time to have your first practice.
Yeah, your health might not be about getting the virus. It might be injuries.
Exactly.
Yeah. And that's the work. There's other forms of safety to be considered.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't know that we'll accomplish our staged entries. We've had all kinds of discussions about possibilities. I don't know that it'll work, but we do know what needs to come first is general conditioning, and then some sports specific, and then moving on. It's got to be phased. I mean, that's basic pedagogy. You have to do that.
Yeah, I mean, and I don't know how we address that. I mean, obviously in the recommendation that we at least, I would think you want at least people to think about that if they haven't. It's hard, we don't want to assume that people would.
To me, Dwayne, that's the last bullet in the return to practice between return to competition, right? Yeah. That there's a phased approach, because you're basically transitioning from here's the phase through practice, conditioning, drill, game-like, and then there you take the step to competition.
Because keep in mind, at our level right now, if our kids go home for Christmas break, we have to do a phased in practice element before we can go full practice now.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So you're talking about we've been dormant for 2-3 months, and you're just going to, and I can see people doing it because they want to get a full season in the summer or something and want to let us go straight into games. It's up to you to do some workouts or throw in or whatever on your own. But that one kid that didn't, that all of a sudden collapses on the field because they haven't been doing anything active, and when you're kind of pushing the situation, is probably to make sure there's some kind of phase guideline. Maybe that's on the front. Maybe that's even on the front end of the from the workouts, from the front end before we start the workout. That maybe there's, that's phasing into not going full bore first day. But like you said, Kim, another interval is that before you get into getting ready for competition. That you're making sure, like, just in case, because if you don't have workouts and you're just going straight to games, you have that option. You want to have something. Even if it's a couple of days is better than nothing.
Well, and below this level, you're dealing with people that don't necessarily have everyday coach training. Is it worth a statement that says, one sentence, it might be a little long, but it says that the stages are very important to the start of this due to the fact, they've been idle for 3 months, potentially idle. Now, the kids that are on full ride across town better not have been idle. They're doing something. But the average participant that we're talking about in the metro area, and even at our level for sure, there's some of them that haven't been able to do much. They might be able to do a lot of jogging, might have been able to do some light workout if they had something at home, but I think there is safety elements that, and I love the way Dwayne said it, there's safety elements that far exceed this virus that we may need to remind people of.
I agree. I mean, I think we were talking about that last time. I think all of us are going to need a little time before we go full board in the office, let alone do anything active. That's a transition from this time period. Okay.
So on that real quick before we move on, I just drafted a sentence and we can add to it, judging by what Julian just said. But before a return to competition, players should go through adequate conditioning to ensure player safety. Well, what are we thinking?
Something to that effect.
I think, yeah.
I mean, you elaborate through your plan.
Yeah.
You think you should also add the word acclimatization for heat?
Yeah.
What was that, Holly? I missed that.
You think you should add something about acclimatization if they haven't been outside at all, just for, I don't know what June's going to, hopefully it's more sunny than it's been this week, but for heat related purposes.
Yeah. Because we really haven't had a spring. It hasn't even been hot at all.
As she said, there's acclimatization, getting used to the temperature, and then there's acclimation, getting used to the sport, and they better be doing both.
And especially if we're encouraging everybody to be outdoors, right? That's what we're talking about, mainly be outside versus
Today's latest piece of COVID news about, the latest thing that I hadn't seen before was that vitamin D, which we all know one of the best ways to get vitamin D is sunshine, and that it was very helpful in recovering and all that stuff. So again, that may change tomorrow, but that's today's. Lots of sunshine, good thing. And
I multivitamin I've been taking every day. That's what's keeping me okay.
That might be. And it was interesting. I don't know if y'all I know we need to move on real quick, but I would encourage you, if you haven't, take a look at UK on Kentucky.com right now. UK's plans for reopening campus. They have 3 different scenarios. And one thing that's, especially if there's anything on campus, is outdoors, 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 moving classes outdoors, moving this outdoors. So anyway, just an aside. I'm sorry, we need to move on.
No, you're fine. I mean, you're fine. Anything else, staff, before we move? Anything we got to review in that part?
I think we're good, Melissa.
Holly, you made me think about that. So if we're talking about the heat element and we've kind of removed, or we probably need to address a little bit because we already took away the cups and all that kind of stuff, right? So we probably just need to make a note that we need to have some level of plan for hydration. We can't just remove it, right? So that's a bad combination. Then most people, we just probably need to say they need to bring their own. I think.
Yeah, I kind of wrote that down. You can tell them to bring their own, but if it's really hot and I drink my whole bottle, then what?
Yeah, that's what sounds like.
Or it just has to be individual.
Yeah, so maybe a bottled water is your backup.
Yeah, maybe that's from a personnel standpoint, or coaches or staff. They need to have some extra kind of bottled water or something to that effect.
Well, we wouldn't
have to. A water fountain's not going to get it. A cooler's not going to get it.
No,
Nope.
But we wouldn't necessarily object to the parents bringing for exclusively their kid either.
Right.
So we probably need that. If you're going to give them options, I think if they brought the little pony cooler, that had 2 bottles of water in it, we don't care, but it can only be used for that child or that child's family.
Right. And I think that's option 1 for sure. But think about the scenario, because it happens now.
Oh, yeah.
Some kid didn't have any water, and either you're getting another thing from another parent, or you're running to the water fountain because that's your only option, right? Concession stands aren't open. So, I mean, we probably just need to reemphasize that a little more. Maybe it's the responsibility of a coach or somebody else to bring some extra.
Well, and Dwayne, that also plays into one of the things we haven't talked about with facilities is part of this early reopening phase requires you to have a procedure for what you're going to do if you feel like somebody has become infected. Fever suddenly shows up. They start getting, so that could probably wrap into that facilities and or league organizers or team organizers need to think about, boom, what are you going to do? Where's the testing center? Yeah, where's the testing center closest to you? Where's this? Where's that? They just need to think about that, because that's all into risk. I know I've talked to a manager at Lowe's, which I practically live at over here by us, and they've struggled with that, because what happens if an employee suddenly looks flush and peaked and they have to recheck their temperature and now it's 102? What do they do?
Well, and then how do you, after they do test positive, I mean, they have a temperature, you think they might have COVID-19, then how do you make sure that everybody they've been around gets traced correctly?
And that's where we've probably got to cross-reference to state procedures. We've got to say that the existing orders and guidance of the Department of Health and the state, they need to be prepared to implement it. Johnny comes in from center field and just all of a sudden looks a little woozy, and now we think we might have a problem. We definitely don't want to go over and feel his forehead, which is our first instinct, is to go touch him. Right.
That was
Julian, that brings up another good point in regards to injuries. You have an injury and you just can't run out there and take care of them like you normally would.
Yep.
They're going to have an idea or a plan, a guideline for how they're going to deal with that.
At our level, we call those emergency action plans, and you all probably do too, but they're going to have, if they're going to go out and use a facility, they've got to have a plan or something. Now, it could be the league, it could be the facility itself. I think a whole lot of, as I look around, and again, I'm down into the below middle school, it was not what we're talking about, but I think there's a lot of our facilities that stay wide open. People just come and use them when they're open. So we got to put the burden on somebody to have thought through that.
And the policing of the policies, right? Where does that fall?
Yep.
That was one of my biggest questions in this, is where does, and that maybe that falls back on the guidelines, maybe that falls back levels above these recommendations, but where does that buck fall?
Right. As I was thinking through some of our own stuff, I was kind of putting my parent hat on, like what's going to make me feel comfortable enough for my kid to even come to campus, or so I want to see all these things in place. One, I'm also going to be constantly wanting to know what's going on without even having been able to witness it myself. And so obviously as you get younger, you're actually going to probably be a part of it. Right. So, we talked about the youth baseball, softball guidelines. If I'm there, your instincts, what do you do? Like it used to be you don't want your mom or dad running out there in the field and shit, but that's probably gonna be the only person that does now.
Right.
Yeah. Yep.
Does that come into your thoughts that unattended is not a good idea? If they're there, if mom drops the kid off at the entrance to the practice or something, we've already told them they shouldn't be at the practice, but now we may be telling them they need to be at the practice for medical.
Stick around.
You got to kind of sort that out. I trust staff to come up with a good clarification on it. Don't give me that look, Melissa. Don't give me that look.
We've dropped down the list of favorite subcommittees now. Thanks, Julian. But I mean, we do got to work through like the role of a parent. I mean, obviously you're going to see a lot of information, right? I mean, from all different ways. And if we get back to playing, like, what are my quick things that I need to know? Okay, I need to bring, because you've done that over time, your experience levels kind of taught you the things you need. It's going to be some new education. You want to make sure people don't miss it. So maybe there is some things that, like you said, Julie, at the end, we pull out the health and safety piece just as some quick things. Maybe there is some recommendation to have some, like where there's a parent, because everybody's great at sending the emails out and newsletters, parent letters and all that kind of things. But you get so many of those things, I'm afraid some people don't read them, right? They're not going to read all these guidelines. How do we make sure and maybe that's on that form or like your.
Or they read the guidance that they just read on Facebook from an article out of Evansville or somewhere that's not anything close to what, we're doing here. That's the challenge. It's good communication.
But you want to be helpful to it because, I mean, like I said, we need the parent buy-in to actually have the athletics.
So do you see, because what you just said, Dwayne, do you see, okay, we've got the 4 basic breakdown segments we talked about, consideration for facilities. Let me call that back up. Where's that document here?
Practice.
Return to competition, return to fans. Do we need, I'm wondering I'm just trying to figure out how they're going to structure it, but do we need a section guidance for parents, guidance for the participants, guidance for officials, guidance for fans? Now the guidance for fans, see, the return to fans is really more about the facility doing it, but are we trying to help the participants, or is our job to talk about facilities and what's open and when it should open or what stages it should open in? And that may be a question for Quinn and Kip and Kevin. I don't know. Or Melissa, I don't know. I don't know what the answer would be there.
I just think
we
got to have a communication plan for the parents. Like it doesn't have to be.
Agreed.
Like, think about addressing your parents directly. Like if I'm on my level, we can have a Zoom call with all the parents. Like we need just to reemphasize that something bit more than just, hey, here's our plan. It's out there for the public or the email or mailing. You probably, because you're not gonna be able to have a meeting in place, and they might not be there, but just taking an extra step. So when you're talking about all the way down, just making sure you're pulling out something that is going to be a little sensitive. If you want to make sure as many of your athletes actually attend it or involved, you're probably going to want to directly address the parents, because that's when you're going to find out if you got any more issues or any questions that we haven't answered, or I don't have a way, I'm not back at work and I don't have daycare. Can they ride with somebody else? Okay, yeah, and what are those guidelines, or how do those sign-offs happen? I'm not there for the temperature thing. I mean, those are all those kind of questions that are going to come up.
Let me ask, is this something that maybe it's some general kind of guideline point that's encouraging all those leagues to have plans and how to communicate those? Yeah. I mean, you all do a good job.
Maybe that's one line and say, hey, you need the need for a parent communication plan, because that's going to be different strokes for different. So, I mean, I'm not,
I'm thinking about.
Don't forget to talk to your parents.
In today's world, that's a bit easier because like you all do before the start of each season, you can bring this into the stadium or you can't bring this into the stadium.
Right.
And while it's a different topic, we encourage you to do the communication with your members and families XYZ.
Yeah, and in this case, our XYZ is somewhat about what you can do and when you can do it, but a lot more about planning. If you're not going to be able to attend, which parent, have thought through which parent can answer questions about your particular child. I don't want to get into sign waivers and all that, but I think if I learned something definitely this spring, it's very difficult for us to communicate with 280 schools and basically 80,000 students when the links we have within the school, the ADs, are not allowed to be in their building. That's been a real challenge this whole 8 weeks, is we haven't had that person that could relay the info. So I think I like your idea, Dwayne, of even if it's a singular bullet, whoever is reading this needs to come up with a way to communicate this with all the parents.
Right.
Because it will be different in different leagues, and different sports might be different.
I agree. So obviously, if we've accomplished all the things with the facilities, the practice, what other things are added for competition?
Is this where we talk about, Dwayne, that in some sports, competition the determination might be made not to have competition until we're at the nationally defined phase 3. We may only have practice in some of these sports till we're at that level, till the governor says we've met the threshold of phase 3 or whatever, where we can have more people involved. Maybe at some point we continue to tie back to other people's directives, whether they're federal or state,
Mhm.
And that way, if they change, we don't have to have, the city doesn't have to go in and change their plan.
Yeah, because I don't think I don't know, and staff, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think looking from direction from us for something that's so far down the line that obviously several things got to happen in place, but probably it's a more of a reminder, one, because just like we said, the things that I've already heard from several people that June 15th means you can play, took that as you can play football.
Yep.
Like, I mean, so more just directing back to where the things that have been established to some degree and just following the guidelines, because more is to come on those kind of things to me.
And Dwayne, that the 4 things that Melissa sent us that you all talked about, that rather than on those last 2, maybe worried about too much being under them, we
Right.
need to stress the order of those. First, we do facilities, then we return to practice, then we talk about competition, and then we talk about fans. And we don't get into the 4th one before we're done with 3 and before we're 3rd one before we're done with 2.
I
And
do think
Julie,
that's
I think
important,
that's
Julie.
a
I
good
think if
point.
everybody could understand that there's steps to this, we'd all be in a better place from a thought standpoint, especially the people that are at the end on the fans, to know
I
that
think
they.
Julian just made a good point, Dwayne, because this was always envisioned to be step 1. How do we get there?
Right.
And maybe expressing those, maybe that's the main point of all of this. Take those, put them in the order you think they need to be in,
Right.
maybe some qualifiers, and realize that, okay, once you are ready for the fans, after those other 3 steps, things are going to have changed dramatically by then. And you need to deal with the implementation of that at that point in time.
Because what's going on in the world could take us backwards.
Absolutely.
No question. Yeah.
But
Well,
I think
these 2 levels, competition and fans, I think introduces a new dynamic, and that is outside of your immediate control.
Yeah.
Right.
I can control my team, right? But what another team comes in now, that's out of my immediate control. And the same with fans. These are people from all walks of life coming into the scenario, and how do you manage that?
And that's where all these groups are working on those pieces, because those are down the line. I've got to try to, they're going to take a lot more things than anybody has access to be able to accomplish those things right now. Right.
Mhm.
We're more talking about even the slightest competition piece is more maybe a youth outdoor sport,
Mm-hmm.
low contact at the most. So obviously it's not that's more the same thing it's going to take to do practice with adding a few parents and the things we have discussed. So maybe you're right, Julian, on those things, or re-emphasizing the steps that have to take place to get to that point using that area, and also more, I guess, addressing that we have to follow those bigger level guidelines that are going to take place. That we don't even have a timeline. We don't have anything past groups of 50 on July 1 right now, right?
Oh.
So certain levels things don't.
I totally agree, because I think we all learned that lesson with masks, because the 1st of March, we've got something that Surgeon General says that masks aren't necessary. And we know that was the 1st or 2nd of March because it keeps recirculating on Facebook from people that don't like to wear masks. But we learned something between March the 2nd, 1st or 2nd, and April. So we probably could make a general statement, Quinn. It just says, look, we're going to learn a lot between now and June 15th. And that may drive more of the competition and fans' answers.
Yeah, because think about it, I'm pretty sure, Holly, you got the same thing. What we can control even on our campus is not really controllable to some degree. So once you get to the point, like Kim said, when you get outside of your control, there's a lot more particulars. It's going to take a while, and we need to evolve a little bit through these first few steps to have a better sense of what that can be.
And I think the work that you all done and some of the things that you've brought up, I think are exactly, I think to Kevin's point, kind of what they were looking for, more in the reopening, and more that there's thought been given to this, that, when we get to June 15th, we'll start, okay, let's start looking at other things. But right now we've done a very thoughtful on how we can reopen. But as learnings come online, just thinking of groups up to 50, I think, football team, small schools, but last time I saw, we got a lot of guys, a lot of participants over 50, and especially in the football sport, which there's just not much we can talk about it right now because the guidance that we're getting from above that does control, it's just going to take some time to play out. But the first things that I think this committee has done is very on point to what I think the mayor and the governor were expecting.
So Kip, are you giving us a heads up that we're going to be reconvening, or are you just letting us know that, okay?
Yeah, I think Kip just said there's going to be a phase 2 to this committee.
Remember, Dwayne, when I told you, I said maybe just 1 or 2 meetings, but no. I think, again,
It's
I think
called
Priority number 3.
yeah.
It's called recruiting, right? That's what that's called, recruiting.
Yeah.
When I first came here, I heard, yeah, it might snow once a year. Well,
Yeah.
Hey, real quick. So going back to that statement that Julian suggested we make, I put together some more draft language here just to want to see if we're comfortable with it. Officials should continue to monitor developments with COVID-19 as they make decisions on competition moving forward. I know that's pretty general, pretty vague. Is there anything we want to add to that, or
maybe saying competition with or without fans?
Yeah.
Adding that element in there.
Good call.
The other thing, because we are dealing with sports, find a modifier for officials. League, tournament, or facility. Don't let it be the referee.
Yeah, it does have a negative connotation.
Because as John can tell you, a lot you don't want to give certain sport officials too much latitude with control.
Oh no! Oh my
Not at the
lord!
local level. High school
They'll
level.
take over the committee.
We'll think about that one, Glenn.
the other thing too I wanted to address, some of the other subcommittees, what they're doing is they are seeking clarification from the governor on certain things that they just don't feel comfortable making specific decisions on. And I think one of the points of maybe some confusion from the governor's office as we look to kind of start to look at different sports and how they start back is, what specific sports can start. I know we're talking about low contact sports kind of starting back here in the middle of June in terms of youth leagues. But do we want to ask for clarification on certain specific sports? What the triggers are, or what we're looking at in terms of what is a low contact sport? Because I think you could argue that some sports are low contact and that others aren't. And I'm just not real sure. If I just want to know from you guys, is that something we want clarification on? If not, that's okay. Just thought I'd bring it up.
It'd be nice.
What was that, John?
I said it'd be nice to have some clarification because, as Julian will tell you, basketball is a non-contact sport with plenty of contact. Soccer's got plenty of contact. Obviously, football's contact. Hell, in cross country, coming off that line, there's plenty of contact.
And at the finish.
Yeah, I don't know what sport they're talking about that's got low contact other than maybe archery.
Well, let me read you a response that I got to our inquiry. I'll read you the relevant sentence. Full contact sports like football, soccer, and basketball present obvious issues. Okay, so we can take them off the table. Football, soccer, but others like cross country, swimming, and volleyball fall into some gray area that still needs to be addressed. So the level of contact is the only issue. They're best handled by season, and it was suggested that we talk about the fall. And that's their direction to us. So I've got a feeling it's probably the same thing that you all are thinking, and that we're talking in this area about baseball, softball, and do we want to talk about I tell you the other one, the elephant in the room, and if she's watching, she's going to faint, but the Bluegrass Games definitely got a lot of inquiries, and our office and others, because it is a multi-sport thing that is, as John knows, very badly needed. So by certain organizations. So I think Quinn's right. I think we make a list. I think we just say, boom, here's what we think. Boom, boom. Okay, this is contact. This is contact. This is contact. This is contact. This isn't. Cross country is okay, but you need to be able to socially distance at the start. we're going to have to give them some specifics to get us an answer. What we don't want is something so ambiguous that the governor comes on at 5 o'clock the next day and says, oh, by the way, this was a good report, but. Anybody disagree? I mean, I'm just suggesting because of our own.
No, that sounds good.
Makes sense. That was good to know that those lists too, because I know you referenced it a little bit earlier. And I was wondering where swimming came into that.
Well, pools themselves can be a problem. It's the relays, and it's going to be what we talk about. So in other words, the swimming's opening in a closed setting, not in a community pool. I don't want Quinn or Melissa or Kevin upset with me. Not in a community pool. We're talking about maybe Trancy's pool or somewhere, and they try to get in. Are we saying no relays because you don't want passing, unquote? What are we saying? We're going to have to probably help get some clarification on that. Because as she said, there is so much contradictory information out there right now about swimming, but it all agrees on you can't do it. It's just there's reasons why are all over the board.
I can't get past indoor swimming just because of the air quality.
Yeah. True. Yep.
Yeah, I was wondering about that, even from a training.
Chlorine cloud.
Yeah, that came up in, I've been hearing a lot of that, even in the rehabilitation.
Can do is help and talk again to the parks rep and whoever you all reach out to. Okay, what are the fall things that are played in the state? And then Quinn just sends them a list.
Even some of the fall things. So, technically running in 6 foot apart is going to be fine, but doing a cross country meet, maybe not. So right. I think that goes back to the practice might happen, competition might not.
Yep. And that's why I like what you all said earlier. And I don't want anybody watching this, or certainly don't want anybody else to think anything's firm. But I think what we're talking about is opening of facilities and practice, and everything else has to be down the road. There is just still too many unanswered questions, and I think the pressure is going to be on the Parks Department when they open up little leagues and stuff like that, because that's not necessarily in the jurisdiction we were asked to talk about. We were talking about high school, for us, high/middle, and then college, but we can't ignore the overlap.
So what I'm hearing on that front is we want to go ahead and try and define those high contact and low contact sports ourselves and submit that to the governor. Is that kind of what I'm hearing?
Yeah, just to clarify that we're correct in our thinking.
And that's what I did with youth. I made the inquiry about youth sports, and the response I got was very helpful. It just said, yes, youth sports should be any age group below middle school. That's a great clarification. And they'll do the same thing with what Kevin and you all send over.
All right. So what are our next steps right now from staff? Do you feel like you have at least enough information? Is that something I get on the phone we walk through, or is that what our challenge is for Friday? Is that what our plan is? I know we said 11. It didn't give us a lot of time. I mean, it's enough time, but if we're in a good spot.
Wayne, I think maybe if we want to do the Friday call, I think what we can do is if Quinn can bullet point kind of where he is on what he's heard from you all. If you have anything specifically, any points you want to make sure get in there, if you can send those to him today,
okay.
Put them in, send them back out, and we can just kind of tick through the list real quickly tomorrow and kind of get the final okay, then I think we're good to go. What do you think, Quinn?
Yeah, I think so. I think we've done some great work today.
Do you need us to see anything as a group before the call tomorrow?
Yeah, I think what we'll do is I'll just go ahead and kind of like Kevin said, get everything into bullet form and send it. I'll send it to Melissa, and then Melissa, if you could just send it to the group. And then what we'll do is after, we can have a short meeting tomorrow, make sure everything's good, clear up any, disagreement on specific language, finish that up. And then what we'll do over the weekend, or what I will do over the weekend, is format it the way we're doing all these subcommittee reports, just to we're keeping everything uniform, but the content won't change. It'll just be the format in which it's laid out on the page.
And Quinn, if you need anything from me over the weekend, I'll definitely be available. So if we got, like, if I find out something new or something changes, or
It's a fluid situation.
I know that's kind of how it goes usually. As soon as you think okay, I think I understand how this is going to go.
Shit.
Wrong.
Page turn.
Yeah, wrong.
Julian, I know I owe you. We need to talk about if we ever get things back going. We got to talk about. I forget. We got to get back to talk about some other things. I need to talk to you too.
I know.
Kip, I got to talk to you too.
Yeah,
Kip,
great.
okay. So Quinn, Kevin, I'll talk to you guys too.
Yeah.
Love you, John.
Stay around, not going anywhere.
John, we're gonna just talk about your collection. We'll go from there.
You know,
I'm gonna switch it and be in a bourbon barrel barn next time. I got to get my internet working. And Dwayne, is your staff actually in? I need to speak to Scott Geisinger. Is he around?
He is, because he's part of our essential staff. So
Okay.
Scott should
I'll
be
call
available.
him.
Yeah, he should be available. Any questions right now?
no, thanks to staff for listening and trying to cobble all this
Imagine
together.
what you guys are doing.
Yeah, kudos.
Unbelievable. We're gonna write really nice letters and we're gonna spend our Friday call doing testaments to how great you guys have been.
Kevin,
Thank you all.
Kevin said, don't phrase it as letters of recommendation, though. He don't want to go anywhere. All right now.
We started this call at 1 o'clock. I'm looking at 1:59 on Kentucky.com. Governor Beshear describes what's needed for UK to play football and fill stadiums during COVID-19. So, like we said,
What are you talking about?
we're doing, you all have done yeoman's job in putting this together, but we all know that, gosh, we all know that we don't know.
Welcome to my everyday world.
Yeah.
I mean, are you guys getting it where every question I get is like, what are we doing? Are we doing this in the fall? I'm like, that answer.
They want to know October's answer right now. I got 2 emails today from parents that want to play in a golf tournament in September in North Carolina. I want to know what we're going to be doing.
Now you'll be able to say, hey, here are the steps.
Yeah.
We need to reopen facilities. We need to get workouts, then practice, then get the competition, then be able to get fans.
Well, we are blessed. We are blessed by some of the national organizations already calling off their events, which prevents everybody wanting to get back too quick and hurrying so they can have their local qualifiers and all. And I think the management council's decision yesterday to keep recruiting shut down through the end of June is a big help as well. That'll slow down people wanting to do stuff a little too fast, particularly in basketball. And so that's it's,
Julian, do you think high school will remain in, and this might not be a fair question, so you can just nod it off, but do you think it'll remain in a dead period rest of the summer?
I think there'll be a point in time that jurisdiction will go to the local level. We're working with KDE and the governor's office on that. What's the best time to transition that? Do you allow things in certain areas that aren't hotspots, but you don't, that maybe right now, if it were today, and again, that's if it's May 14th, Bowling Green's a little warm right now in terms of cases, so maybe they don't get to do some stuff. I think you're going to have to turn over some local control at some point, but it will remain for a little while.
Thanks.
Yeah, I know that certain basketball coach, that's the son of a basketball coach, is always, I've gotten a few texts just trying to figure out. I said, Brian, I wish I could help you. I'm sorry. We don't know. I think we all are best to remember the words that Fauci said one time early on, the virus is in control. And then from there on out, we're just playing it out. So
true. All right. Well, thanks everybody for your time today. Anything else for the record, Quinn, before Melissa, Kevin, before we shut her down?
I think just we'll have our final meeting tomorrow at 11. So shouldn't take long. So we look forward to seeing everybody tomorrow at 11.
Thank you all.
Thanks, everybody.
Yep,
All right,
that'll work.
Don't.